great half days there, and we look forward to another 2 days here. I want to start by thanking Wes Finday, Knowledge Keeper from Sweetgrass First Nation. He has very generously offered to open the Saskatoon portion of this symposium with a blessing. Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to the person who provided the tobacco and the cloth. Whenever we do anything,
he has very
we say we are a spiritual people.
Open the Saskatoon portion
And
of this symposium
that's more
with a
than
blessing.
just words that we mouth and we set free. We say we are a spiritual people, and in our ceremonies we are directed, guided by the spirits, that whenever we are engaging in an activity which is meaningful and to help us move it beyond the physical and an intellectual exercise, and that we incorporate or we begin with ceremony. We say we are a Creator for in our gift of another day and the opportunity to be present in a time and place where we can share what we have earned, the right to speak about, and to help us move. And just in keeping with that, I will say that when you come into a land with ceremony, it's important to come in a sacred manner. There is always ceremony. When we come to a new place, I went to Ottawa and I went to the Chippewa community. I had never been there. But when I went there, I went and I took a willow and I made an offering stick. It's important. And I took tobacco, and I went and did a ceremony, because I understand that in that place is not an empty Chippewa wasteland. I had never been devoid of life. But when I went there, I know that in every place on the earth there are spirits, and I made they have their doorways. They have their doorways in the sky, and I went and did a ceremony. Because I understand they must be acknowledged, and so I sat and I smudged and I made a tobacco offering, and I asked the spirits of that place to welcome me. That I was a stranger, that in every place on this earth I had not been. There are spirits, but that I was approaching in a sacred manner. They have their doorways in the sky, and I went and did a ceremony. Because I understand they must be acknowledged, and so I sat and I smudged and I made a tobacco offering, and I asked the spirits of that place to welcome me. That I was a stranger, that in every place on this earth I had not been. There are missteps, because I am not familiar with this land or the spirits that reside there. And there was a spirit on that island that came to me and spoke and said, it has been generations since the time of your grandfathers that someone has come and done ceremony for us. And we thank you, grandchild. And so one of the things I would like you to understand is that there is a system in place here. But before, I will go into that in a little detail, but before we begin, I want to express my thanks to Creator, and I will be speaking in my own mother tongue. And to the spirits that reside in this place, there are actually 9 spirits that have doorways in this place. We did a shaking lodge here, and they came and they spoke to us about what the significance, the history, the stories of this land. And so we learned from the spirits, because it is beyond the memory of most people. Not had the opportunity develop the ability to access the knowledge which goes beyond their memory. And magaptamaniga ituan mamawahtawi ma ipnanaskumtan ipnanaskutaman giksewat suwenoma itah kapmayaw hiyan ko takkisigaw kapmayaw hiya koma miyo mahchihon miyo mamtunehtikan miyo waskawiwet nohtagit timagi tawan ko apamen niya papampitu magapmaitigusiyan itah kapmawahtautaman nohta itah kapmamamskutigaya koma kap mamamaw pa iya utah mahtimiyo gigway mo papasigo maganoma miyo nokte kaysi nigap maisuhten gana nigap gagiwet tamo na nagtawasam sina nagmiyo gigway gigap mawichi kotik nohta gagipim kikpaktuniya kutah kakyo gigway gigap maya pachita ya gugwanan ma pakusay mo yan gigap papahpaw epinamaw ya koma minagap miso asagame piego magap mamaumostaha gano yek timagi toek ni mosumtik sa wastimgap maitigo sin kisigaw pisim kapi siwian ka mahih gano yan ka gap mamaumostaha gano yek nutugewa tayo kan gap gagisitawas yan wape mostos wape maskwah kap maitigo siego magap miso asagame piek kap seskiwe kap mautahtakwan yek gagi si mo tutin kita punwawa kit skwahte muawa kikap nantoh tamo piego maha kikap mawicha hiyak mi anak te kise kikap maitskwe haya ako gogin tay sinim na nakapentoh tamopsik eksep may tuhta no manigagi si mo na mo sumtik kitimagi tawik ay. And as I was saying, there is a system in place. Many of us are not familiar with these ancient systems because we have been born into and exist in artificially created environments where we think we have control. At this point in our history, it's critical for us as humans to be able to move past those artificial constructs and to begin to acknowledge that within this creation, we are only a small part of this as individuals. And our families, our communities, our societies are all dependent upon the natural world. We have put up walls, and all those walls do is keep us in. They are powerless against the natural order. It is important to develop an understanding and a sense, awinomania, who am I? I am a multi-dimensional being. In our stories, we say that humans were created in the image of Creator. The image of Creator is not accessible to humans through the eyes you have been given. Many people cannot hear the spirits. So you were given hearts. You were given emotions so that you could feel. What you cannot see, you should be able to feel. You should have the courage to open up your hearts so that you can feel what it is that you cannot see and what the mind cannot remember. It is not that it is impossible, because the mind is a powerful thing. It can lead us to discoveries that are life-changing. But there will be moments in our lives when everything that we thought we knew may be turned on its head because we have learned something so new and so powerful that it causes us to question ourselves, question our assumptions, question our opinions. That takes courage. So, in the journey to learn who you are, this is not for the faint-hearted or the feeble-minded. You want to understand yourself as a spiritual being, then understand that there are spiritual laws. These are not laws that are enacted in Ottawa or at the legislature in Regina or at City Hall. But these are laws that we were given to guide the way that we live our lives. When we were loaned an earth life. And before we were allowed to come here, we were called before Creator as spirits. And we say we are created in the image of Creator. The image of the Creator within every human being is the part that cannot be seen. But it must be felt. When Creator called us, we were given tasks and we were given a specific time to finish those tasks, to become, to evolve, to develop into the humans we have the potential to become according to Creator's dream. We were sent here to fulfill Creator's dream. But in the trauma of birthing and moving from one dimension into the other, those ancient memories were filtered out of our consciousness. We have knowledge keepers who have gone back to acquire the memories and have come back with stories. And the stories are guides. The stories can help us to understand how to become who Creator dreamed us to become if we set our minds. There are things that you need, and like any system of learning, my boys go to the university here, and sometimes they come back from school and they are so frustrated. They say, Dad, you know what they said in Native Studies? You know what they were telling me in Native Studies? And I tried to set that professor straight. And I said to them, don't waste your time trying to educate these educators. They have been given degrees which tell them they are professionals. And they have believed that. And they are no longer open to learning. That is why when you go and sit in their classes, they will tell you who they are, who you are in their language. They will try to tell you your history. They will tell you about all of these things that emanate from their understanding. And they will try to define who you are. It is up to you to define who you are, not filtered through someone else's opinions and someone else's worldview. When you come into that institution, you are coming looking for tools. We need to improve the quality of life that we live. Our communities suffer while our land is rich with resources. We made agreements to share this land when these immigrants came. And they came wanting not to come here to die, but to come here to live. And they had their animals. They had their practices. They could make gardens to grow plants. and they grew small plots of grain that they used to make things that they used to sustain themselves. And when they came into our country, we said we would share the land with them. They could have a place to build their homes and to raise their animals and to grow their gardens and to grow their crops. We accorded them the right and use and occupation of the resources for subsistence, so they could subsist. Today, if I go out and hunt, I am told that I can only take as much meat as I can eat, or my family can eat. And if I give some away, it's trafficking. I could be prosecuted for that. I can only take enough fish to sustain myself. The fish, the animals, the birds, the water, the air, the land were the resources that Creator placed me here with to sustain myself and my family, my community, my society. And all of a sudden, there are laws today that say I cannot live the life that Creator put me here to live, or I may be punished by these immigrants because they have brought with them their own laws, which make it illegal for me to be who I am. When I was kidnapped and dragged off to school, it was illegal for me to speak my language, and so I had to learn another. I have no fear of learning. But I could not accept what I was told in that institution where I was irrelevant, I was useless, I had no purpose. My ceremonies, all of these things that I held dear were simply belief systems that existed to pay homage to the devil, whoever that is. But how irrelevant I was. And I ran away, I escaped. But I survived. Many people did not. People who ran away, their bodies were carried back. And they were buried at those schools, or I don't know what happened. Many of them just went missing. But we were denied that ability to understand who we were. Rather than being educated, we were being brainwashed. And many people had to submit to that. They had to say, yes, I agree, I'm worthless, I'm nobody, I'm nothing. And I will never become anything. I will never be of any value in your society. And those today are many of the things that so many of our people are still suffering from. But today is a time for change. A change that was predicted in the prophecies. A change that was told that the Spirit said there will be people from all over the world who will come to your lodge, who will come seeking teachings, who will come seeking the healing that they require, because their minds, their hearts, their souls, and their bodies have become sickened. There are spirit trails from all over the earth that come to these sacred places in our land. And when they arrive, grandchild, the Spirit said, if they arrive approaching in a sacred manner, if they arrive with the keys, the tools to access that which you carry, welcome them and understand that it is we who have guided them. It is not that they have stumbled upon this place at this time. It is because they took the time and spent the effort to learn what they need to know in terms of how to approach in a sacred manner. And what you refer to as monuments, there is a medicine wheel here. You know, archaeologists go and dig it up looking for things that will tell them, what is this? In the Shaking Lodge we did, what is this that these educated people, through their digging, they have their opinions. And the Spirit said to me, that was built 1700 years ago. When there was a community, a mixed tribes here, that had wintered here. And in the springtime, a sickness came into the camp. And many people suffered from that sickness, and the medicine people could not find a cure. And there was 17 pipe keepers that went onto that hill and did ceremony. And they made that medicine wheel, as we refer to it today. They called upon all their spirit helpers and asked for help to defeat this sickness and to heal the people. That was 1700 years ago. That's where that came from. And so our idea of learning, our idea of science is totally different. Opinions are only opinions and do not have much value in our circles of knowledge. It's when they have been validated by the spirits, because that is where we go to seek guidance and to ask for direction into, are we on the right track here? Is this going to take me somewhere where I can earn the right to speak about something? Because it is connected to, it has been validated by the spirit world, and it is propelled by the emotions of, or by the energy of the emotional dimension through this physical being and into the words that I speak and set free. There is a process. There are laws, there are shields. And it is important, if you come seeking these things, that you learn about those. So I want to welcome you all to this sacred place. I have asked the spirits whose doorways are here to come and sit in this gathering and to guide the course of the conversation so that it will be positive and respectful and meaningful, and to bring aspects of the holy into this gathering. Yksi.
Thank you so much, Wes. I'd like to thank and call up Tribal Chief Felix Thomas from the Saskatoon Tribal Council, who's also going to welcome us to Treaty 6.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Wes for the prayer this morning and inviting the spirits and Creator not only to this place, but also into your hearts and in your minds. And that's what we do as a custom and as protocol, because some of us need all the help we can get in terms of what we're going to say and what we're going to do and how we're going to conduct ourselves. But also, I guess on a formal basis, welcome you to Treaty 6 territory. This is a vast territory. It's not our Treaty 6 is a political territory. Wanuskewin is a spiritual and Aboriginal territory for Indigenous territory, and so these are some of the things that we have to consider when we have these events. And when we talk about monuments and it's one of those things where we have a different idea of monuments. At least I do, and it's my own opinion. And our monuments are designed to tell a story and to tell emotions, or give it what we feel, or tell our feelings, and which is different from other monuments and non-native monuments. Typically tell about how great we are, and we commission these monuments, or our family members, or we donate money to have these so our monuments could be named after us. And these are some of the things that I think we have to remember when we were talking about some of the difference between indigenous monuments and other monuments around the world. Not only are they we're getting more formal monuments, but we also have the natural monuments that are here, that are created for a purpose, and it's the purpose is revolves around spirituality and doesn't revolve around religion. And there's something that I had an interesting discussion last past week with a gentleman from Southern Africa, not South Africa, from Southern Africa, and we talked about the similarities of our spirituality, and we both agreed that, you know, as much as colonization doesn't like it, they try to replace spirituality with religion. And it's something that religion was there to make us more human, make us more structured, and make us more colonized. Because with spirituality, you're talking directly with the Creator, and you're talking directly with the spirits. And religion, you can talk to the priest, or to the reverend, or whoever it is, and they are the messengers. Whereas when Wes talks about the shaking tent, that was, or a house, or however we want to call it, those for those of you that have been fortunate to be in one, you know that there is a difference, and that difference is the spirits are talking to you directly and without a middleman. So that's aside from what your conference is about, and the first time I've ever spoke to a traveling conference. But I wanted to welcome you to Treaty 6, and for the First Nations, at least the ones I represent, treaties, we signed them. It was about opportunities, two different kinds of opportunities. Opportunities to maintain and enhance what we currently believed, what our current culture was, what our current ways of life were, and opportunities for a new life and a new way. We recognize that we're transitioning, and we need to start dealing and living with a new society. So when you look at the treaty documents, you'll see the language in there is a mix of old and new. You see the old language about the waters flowing, the grass growing, and those things are part of our heritage, part of our culture, part of our spirit. That's why we non-indigenize them into the written form, because we know that we have to take the best of both worlds and try and keep what we had, but enhance those. And the other thing that I always tell people is that there's that document, and there's the Indian Act document that was like the religion that tried to force control over the First Nations. The Indian Act was not about opportunity, it was about control, and it was about non-indigenizing the indigenous people. So I think those are, and I'm glad that we have a small group or a large group of people that are willing to look past some of the media, look past some of the stereotypes, and look at what's really inside and what's really important to First Nations. And for those of you that talked about the weather here, my first thought this morning was isn't it great that our grandfather blessed all this wisdom of the snow on Mother Earth? That's what people like Wes, people like my elders think about, is that when they first see that first snowfall. And for in our way of life and growing up on a reserve, this is when the stories began. This is when the wisdom of our grandfathers fell on Mother Earth. This is our storytelling time. This is when our season began. So with that, I think it's appropriate, and I think it's probably a good sign for your conference to be here, because the other night we had no snow here. We had no wisdom for you to to help you, and this is what the snow brings. This is the wisdom the snow provides to us. So with that, welcome to the Treaty 6 territory, and on behalf of the communities that I represent, not only in the city but Kiniston, Muskeg Lake, Mestawasis, Muscadet, One Arrow, Whitecap, and Yellow Quill. I hope you have a good conference, and thank you for allowing me to give my 2 cents in, and thanks again to Wes for imparting a bit of the knowledge that he's gained from his elders and the spirits that have guided him. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Thomas. I have to ask if Robert Doucette is here. No. So I believe that the Wisdom Outdoors has held up a few of our participants. I would like to invite Dana Sunius, the Chief Executive Officer of Wanuskewin Heritage Park, here to say a couple of words. We've had the pleasure of working with Dana on this project this year, and we're just so grateful to be here. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank one of our elders here at Wanuskewin. We have several elders that guide us, help us, assist us. We've gone through many changes, as many of you know, over the last few years. Wanuskewin has been a place of sharing, a place of giving, as Wes attested to, going back. We're talking going from traditional to contemporary, and what that means to our people, and what that means to this location, what that means as an organization here, and who we are as a people really pull at the heartstrings of this past knowledge of what it is as who we are as the people of this land, and what that is has been a transition from that time to today. And I think this conference today will talk and speak to those, and there's many issues. Like Wanuskewin has been challenged right from day one on everything that it's done and everything that it's been guided through. There's been hurdles and challenges all the way through, and that's not going to stop. But I think this is an interesting time that we can begin to talk about those in an open format, because there are so many opinions, there are so many teachings and experiences that challenge those differences between what we say is our traditional teachings and then what is in the contemporary society. And how do we transition together so that the artists, the people that have been come from that era and that generation, the history to what Wes was attesting to in the universities that's being taught to our children, to our people. So I think it's an interesting and a great opportunity today for everyone here to begin to understand what those differences are and have an open dialogue so that we can learn more of how we can overcome that, because Wanuskewin is we're in a growth mode right now. We have an opportunity here where this organization is going to change. We are changing. We've grown. I've been here 6 years, and we've opened the doors And we've welcomed everybody back, and it's great to see so many people from so many different locations coming here and working with Jen and the others, Wayne and others, and Haima and everyone with the organizing committee to start having these conversations, because Wanuskewin, we're growing, we're expanding, we're undertaking an aggressive campaign here over the next few years. We're in the silent phase as we speak, and we're growing those partnerships, but we want to become a space where our people, our artists, our knowledge keepers can share that traditional knowledge and those traditional art in today's society. And we're going to have new galleries. We have existing galleries. We're going to have exhibits. We're going to have spaces that are dedicated to that. So I think it's an interesting time for us to begin to share those ideas, and that communication should start here today. So I want to thank you all for coming. I'm looking forward to the discussions that will be happening here. And I know there's a lot of professional people here that I'm happy to see come to Wanuskewin who may not have been here for many years and are probably wondering what all is happening at Wanuskewin. So for that, I thank you all for coming today and the first snowfall of the season. I like the perspective that the Chief has put on this, because that is a good sign. It was a challenge to get here, but everything in our life has been a challenge one way or another, and through those challenges we start to see the rewards. And from that, I want to thank you for coming, and I won't hold you up any much longer here, but I just thought I'd share those words because we are in a transition, and we are looking forward to growing that partnership with a contemporary, from the traditional to contemporary, through our monuments and through other pieces that we have. So thank you.
Thanks so much. So with those wonderful words, we are going to start with a very brief recap of the last 2 days for the benefit of the people who are joining us today who weren't present in Calgary and who haven't been able to watch the live stream. Neil McLeod is unable to be with us here today, so Ashok Mathur, who is our key moderator, is going to come up and take the mic now and give us a little medley or something of what we've discussed so far. Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you, Jen. And it's so overwhelming to be here. I can't begin to say. My name's Ashok Mathur. I'm currently in Okanagan Territory, where I'm teaching, and before that in the Secwepemc Territory. And I come from a Kayast and Parsi background, immigrant background from India. And I've lived in a number of territories here, and I'm always profoundly grateful for that. And I'm also very grateful for this gathering, for the hosting here. Thanks to West Fine Day for that beautiful introduction. And we've had a couple of days that I'm going to go over here very briefly and try and recap. And thanks, Jen, for asking me to do this, because this is the easy part, isn't it? Right. Yesterday, a few of us were talking about history. History's, of course, repeated itself in many ways. It's come back to haunt us in many ways here. And someone had mentioned a Maori concept, which is something I've been using in my classes a lot, which is to look backwards or walk backwards into the future. The idea being, of course, we can't go into the future without seeing where we're coming from. So in the spirit of that, I think what I'm going to do is take a look at what you did over the last couple of days, going backwards, certainly the most recent, and then going backwards from there. And then I'll touch really briefly on some of the key comments that have come up, and I hope we can take that into our own futures. We ended off yesterday with a panel called The World Upside Down, Challenges in the Local Context, with Lorna Crosby from the Siksika Nation, Tanya Harnett, Quen Hong, Candace Hopkins, or Candace wasn't on that panel, but Ronald Hawker. talking about the local. And I think one of the things that we're doing as we go between two very distinct and very different sites is to understand and respect the notion of the local in all that we're doing. And when I say that, I don't mean the notion of globalization, the multiple the sites that we inhabit, but the multiple locals that we're part of, because they are connected, and we need to look at that. And I think this panel tried to address that, and we'll be ending off tomorrow with a panel that will also be looking at those locals. And before that, we had a panel on yesterday morning on defacement, what happens when monuments are altered, with Manuel Pena, Mick Tossig, Jeff Thomas, Candace Hopkins, and Richard Hill. And that panel, which I'll talk about in a moment, was quite interesting. The idea that monuments become recognized when something happens to them, as opposed to just when they're sitting there on the top of a hill or on top of in a city square. The day before that, we ended off with a panel. Your history is not my memory. What's been forgotten, with Marcia, Crosby, Geir, Holm, Laura Reuter, Sandra Semchuk, and Richard Hill, with some very provocative ideas about what memory can be and what it is to us. And before that, we had a panel, Who's Heroes? Why do Monuments Matter? The very idea about whether we should be taking these things very seriously, or do we need to recreate and rethink where we're coming from. And of course, then we started with a keynote from Jimmy Durham, and I'm going to just talk a couple of minutes about the type of work that came out from there. First of all, Jen had introduced us to the idea of this conference, which came about probably starting 12 years ago, with a conversation with 6 or 7 artists, and of course it's grown to what it is today. And she went through some very provocative thoughts too about how this gathering could come into being, mainly with these conversations with Jimmy. This, of course, is all archived, so you can take a look at Jimmy speaking to us from Berlin, from his hospital bed. And just like to take a moment to say some of what he was talking about was a proposition that the monuments in the Americas are always a testament to colonial violence against indigenous peoples. And he went further and said the dams that are built, the bridges, the cities themselves can be seen as these monuments and as a violent oppression. How do we move beyond that is the key in the question. How do we move into the counter-monument? We looked at a number of through speakers, a number of key elements around how genocides have been, in a sense, celebrated through these monuments, and then we started to talk a bit about the countering of that, the idea of what happens when you deface and move something through. Candace Hopkins was talking in very engaging ways about what happens when the example she gave us of a foot being removed from a monument, which of course was reminiscent then of colonial violence, of actual atrocities being committed. But in response to that, to recognize that these monuments can then tell stories in a different way. We had a panel with Mick Tossig and Manuel Pena showing us about the other forms of desecration, where the actual removal of monuments and what that can mean, and what happens to those spaces that are left there. Richard Hill gave us some very thought-provoking comments about how we look at the idea of tradition and what we do with that. Do we mindlessly follow it, or do we challenge ourselves at every moment of every day? And I think that is a huge takeaway for us. How do we challenge not just our histories and some problematic histories, but ourselves and each other in this space? Because with that, perhaps we'll be able to move forward in a way that can be quite interesting and quite fruitful. And finally, one of the things that we've noticed, and Jen pointed this out as she's writing to me at 5 o'clock this morning with some of her thoughts, and I'm pretty amazed she can be as cogent and coherent at 5 o'clock in the morning when I can barely do that when I've had a full night's sleep, was that the conference, of course, the engagement during the panels has been exciting and thought-provoking, but it's those interstitial spaces, what's happened after, during coffees, when people are on buses, when we're just before we're going to bed, just when we're rising. Those are the conversations that are challenging us in particular ways. The problematics that we haven't yet talked about, something that Jimmy brought up too, which was the unfortunate binary of the white versus indigenous, when he said the peoples of the Americas are actually much wider than that, and we need to be looking at that. and those contexts, and also the changing demographics. What's going to be happening as Indigenous presences are growing as they are in a place like the region we're in right here, where the whole future is changing in front of us. And so that, I think, is the best and closest I can come to recapping 2 incredible, full and fruitful days. I can't do it justice, and I urge people to take a look at the archive material. It's online, because we have a great deal of information there, and also to have these conversations that we're talking about here, not at the panel, but outside. Go for a walk. I'll go with you. And with that, I'm going to introduce. I want to introduce Gregory Scofield. Greg's someone I've known for a number of years. I haven't had the pleasure of hearing him read as much as I would like to, and I was reminded of that when I heard him the other day. Greg is a Métis poet, a playwright, a youth outreach worker. He has taught and been a writer-in-residence at so many places, like he's been at ACAD, at Emily Carr, both places that I've been at as well, and it's been exciting to see him move around. He's now at Laurentian teaching there. And his influence and effect, I think, is really important. And the last thing I'd like to say is about poetry, actually, which is when I heard him read the other day, I thought how it's not the language on the page, it's not the language that he's bringing to us, it's the language that's coming from inside of him. And I was moved by the way it resonated inside my body as I listened, and I looked around me and I saw the same things happening, the things that can happen with poetry. And now I'm effectively stalling as I'm trying to figure out if they're miking him or if I could say more about Greg, I suppose. He tells me not to.
I was bringing my mic.
Well, I'd like you then to thank you, welcome you to this space. Thank you again to West Fine Day, and to hope you can help me in welcoming up to the front here the amazing and delightful Gregory Scofield.
Oh. Oh, I think I'm on. Danse. Wanuskewin, Dana, Chief Felix, for your opening comments this morning, for welcoming us to Treaty 6 territory and to the land of Wanuskewin, my ancestors. Part of my family comes from this area. It's a real honor to have been asked. Jen, thank you for inviting me to come and read and talk at the conference and to bring my poetry. I'm very, very honored to do so. I was thinking about what I wanted to present this morning, and me, I'm one of those writers that I usually always pick the stuff that I'm going to read whenever I get to a conference or whenever I get to a place, because I want to see what the conversation is about and what's happening. It's really hard to kind of pick stuff. So, of course, I was scrambling this morning, and I mean, I'm even scrambling right now after all of this wonderful conversation. And I was, as Wes was talking, I was listening, and I was kind of going through my poetry and thinking, you know, what I wanted to share and what I wanted to leave with today. And I guess one of the things that I was thinking about, and I mean for those of you who are new here, those of you who've never come to Wanuskewin before, one of the things I was thinking about, and you'll probably see out in the lobby that there's these, the banners for the Walking with Our Sisters project, that the installation that was actually just here for a couple of weeks. That's a commemorative memorial installation that is honoring the lives and the experiences of over 1,700 missing and murdered Indigenous women in this country. And that installation, I believe this is the 5th place that the installation has come to. And I know that there's a very large ceremonial element to that installation. And in kind of keeping with the idea of monuments and thinking about monuments, that's pretty much what I picked this morning, what I'd like to share with you, and it'll kind of make sense as I do my readings. But I wanted to say, I just kind of scribbled down some notes this morning, and what I wanted to say is that I'm not going to, I don't want to talk about my interpretation of monuments or the idea of anti-monuments, because there's all of you here, you're the experts, you're the ones, you're the ones that work with those monuments, that deconstruct them, that talk about them, that paint them, that make them. I mean, I make my own monuments, I guess, through poetry. As I was saying, what I had wanted to talk about was kind of here and now, and what's been happening the last couple of weeks in this building and on this territory. And what I'm asking, I guess, today with the poems that I'll share with you is that you know, perhaps you can see these poems as monuments, if you will, or you can see them as monuments of construction or deconstruction. But really what I hope for you to do is I hope for you to see them as monuments that I made with words, monuments that have been made from flesh and bone, from teeth, from hair, from all of those things, from love, from hate, and from all of those things in between. And I hope that you're able to see these pieces today, or hear these pieces, take these pieces into yourself today as really as monuments of ceremony. So once again, I just would like to, I'd like to say how honored I am to be here, how honored I am to be sharing my poetry with all of you this morning. And here goes. I'd like to begin with a piece called Astam Bimicho, which in Cree means come eat. I am all laid out on the table that has seen birth and death. Astam Bimicho. Well, I am hot and steaming. Take first my fingers, all 10 of them, a basket that holds the plumpest of berries. Make sweet your tongue that'll give way to humming. I am all laid out on the table, a wooden bowl of boiled bones. Astam Bimicho. I am begging to be greased, held to your mouth for sucking. Behold the table that has seen birth and death, this abundance where I give you my fattest parts to be chewed like wheat dogo. Oh yeah, make sharp your teeth where I am most tender. Then there is the tray made of spruce and bark. It is oval and holds perfectly the jackfish of my belly, the wild onions. I say, Astam Bimicho, while I am spread out, set upon this table that has seen birth and death. Here too is a duck whose breast is my tongue, having nested all summer. Now make it fly up, call it to where you are warmest. Sing it to this place you are saving for ceremony. Bimicho, Bimicho, I am your soup pot, a prayer sung stew. My legs are 2 rabbits, and these are my toes to be bitten like turnips. I am all laid out for you to see, to taste the feast of me. Look to the left where I am a small bowl of dried meat. Hold me between your lips and eat me slowly, sacred little bites. Then I will say to you, Gigispun, the dead will see what we have done, and the living will go away with crumbs in their mouths. Then the drums will pulse, the-thump, 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 and you will be all motion, a shadow like the dogs outside. I want to share a few pieces this morning that are important pieces, and that are pieces that are being constructed, if you will, all over this country. and I was talking about the project with Walking with Our Sisters. This is a piece that I had written quite some time ago, and it's called Conversation with the Poet Who Didn't Know My Auntie. A few years ago, at a reading of erotic poetry, a poet read a poem by another poet about a toothless Eskimo woman in a bar, looking for someone, anyone to buy her a drink, and what she did, what that Eskimo woman did for a drink. Long ago, when my auntie was no longer mean man's wife, punching bag woman as she was called, she had met the Muniao, a white man. He was the one that called her good cooking day woman or good laundry day woman or sometimes good with the money day woman. Now, my auntie had TB in her lungs, which took her to Edmonton, down to a hospital in Vancouver. I used to hear about it at that time. It must have been hard for her. She had 3 sons, my auntie did, but 2 of her boys got sick and died in Wabasca. Her other boy, John Hoole as he was called, was killed in a car accident coming home for Christmas. I used to hear her talk about it sometimes. She'd say to me, one night back home I was sitting having tea and I looked out at the clothesline and sure enough there were 3 owls sitting there, tapwe, just sitting there hooting away on my clothesline. It's true, she told me. And those owls started making somersaults, spinning around and around like this, she told me. A few years ago, at a reading of erotic poetry, a poet read a poem by another poet about a toothless Eskimo woman who could be in Japan hunting to feed the family woman, who could be Nimama holding up the walls woman, who could be a Kaskitewiasko, a Sikpatausko, a Muniasko, running from a white man, any man, into the arms of a poet in a bar, looking for someone, anyone, to buy her a drink. My auntie, as I was saying here before, lost her boys early on. That is how I came to be her son. And Gus says, now you take the place of my John, she used to say. And I treated her as my mother. Ni mama says, my little mother, I used to call her. My own mother, Dorothy was her name, did not mind this arrangement, for it was good for me to have 2 mothers. It was these women who raised me by themselves. They were poor, my mothers, but it didn't seem to matter. There were many things to keep a young boy occupied, books, music, stories, and beadwork. I recall one time watching my auntie sew some moccasins. So interested was I that I kept moving closer and closer to her work. She did not seem to mind this. Now, my little mother used to sew with very long threads, and her needle would move very quickly. But this time I did not pay attention, so engrossed with her moccasins. She must have known this, for she took her saponigan, that needle, and poked me right on the nose. Was ma good, she said. Go on, big nose. That's what she told me. A few years ago, at a reading of erotic poetry, a poet read a poem by another poet about a toothless Eskimo woman. She was fat, a seal for the taking. She was dirty, a bag of muskox bones crawling with lice. She was dumb. Her language, click, click, made people laugh. She was looking for someone, anyone, to buy her a drink. I will not say my mothers did not have trouble with drinking, or they did not lose days keeping the house in order. It's true, they had weaknesses here and there, just like other people. And as far as my little mother goes, though she loved me a great deal, she did not ever get over losing her boys. I guess that's why today I speak so proudly about her, for she taught me many good things. A few years ago, at a reading of erotic poetry, a poet read a poem by another poet about a toothless Eskimo woman and what she did, what that woman did for a drink. It was in a bar. It could be from my childhood. A room of white faces, a poetry hall of uproarious mouths, a room of unbound limbs laughing deep in their bones. Or it could be my auntie's rape bed, the man who took her like a monument, step after violent step. Or it could be her deathbed, all 69 years of her lost in the translation of a policeman's report. It could be, yes, the bed where she told me stories, the bed where I laid dreaming. This is as much as I am able to tell about my auntie, but there is one thing, another thing, one more thing you must know. I loved her very much, and I still think of her whenever I am lonesome. Yokse, I'm done. I want to give you a little piece, a little snippet of advice from my auntie. My auntie's name was Georgina. This is called The Ting About Waltzing. If you take anything away from this conference, take away this little piece of advice. The thing about waltzing is, she said, never let the woman lead. 'Cause if you do, she'll take your pants, make you sign your checks and hand them over, push you out of bed to feed the babies, do the dishes if she wishes, make you hem her slacks, go and get flour from the store to bakes her a cake, ice the damn thing too. Best thing, she said, are the ones that step on your toes. So if you take anything away, I want to leave you with this last poem. This was a poem, and for many of the artists, many of the people here, you'll know that when you're working on something, and I mean, I don't know what it's like working on sculpture, I don't know what it's like painting something, I don't know what it's like working in other mediums, but all of the artists, all of the people here will know, they'll understand when I say this, that when something comes to you, a gift comes to you, it comes to you very, very quickly, and you find yourself working very, very quickly. This was one of the pieces in probably the 25 years that I've been writing. This was probably one of very few pieces that ever came to me very quickly. This happened probably in about a span of 10 minutes. And this was actually inspired. This piece was actually inspired. I was sitting at the counter in our old house in British Columbia, and when I'm not writing and when I'm not teaching or I'm not being a poet, I love to read country living magazines. And I was sitting at the counter and I was drinking a cup of tea and I was reading this country living magazine, and there was this really big expose, this really big feature that they had done on Pendleton blankets. And for those of you who don't know what the Pendleton blankets are, I mean, they're the Indian trade blankets that were made and that are still made in Pendleton, Oregon. So if you go to powwows, you'll see, people are sitting on these blankets. They're these beautiful, beautiful, very thick woolen milled blankets with all these beautiful geometric designs. So there was this big feature in Country Living on Pendleton blankets, and the photographer had done this, kind of big photo shoot, and blankets were laying on couches, on beds, and people were wearing blankets, and they were being featured every which way possible. So I'm reading this article, and this quote by a fellow who was doing the article, whose name was Barry Friedman, this quote just jumped out at me, and the quote was, "An Indian and his blanket were inseparable." So I put the magazine aside, I grabbed a pen, and I started writing. This is what I came up with. This is my blanket. This is my blanket. I am nothing without my blanket. This is the key to the storehouse. I am in charge here. This is my blanket, spectacularly hued, wildly patterned, an end to the Indian Wars. I am federally licensed to write this poem. I am nothing without my blanket. This is the big of the whole thing. This is the key to the storehouse, brimming with treasure. Hail the missing and murdered, the names yet recorded. I am in charge here. It's not that I'm a country wife to be swooned. It's not that straightforward. I wear this blanket to keep my mother warm. She lived in an old meat truck, made homey with doilies and rag rugs. Each month she cashed her check because she was federally licensed too. This is the big of the whole thing. She was nothing without her blanket, my mama, the perpetual lady of sorrows. But this is not to say she was easily swooned. She wore her blanket like perfume. It was her formal dress, a real zinger. I am nothing without my blanket. This is the key to my auntie's house. She got raped here on this blanket, spectacularly hued, wildly patterned, an end to the Indian Wars. The man who did it was federally licensed. Now her blanket is a living, breathing textile, not something you fish out of the closet when it starts snowing. This is the big of the whole thing. This is my blanket. This is the key to the storehouse. I am in charge here.
I'm always completely speechless after Gregory Scofield speaks his poetry, sings it. My husband spent all day Friday at work he was a technical writer for agricultural equipment, and he spent the whole day in his office watching the conference online. And on Friday, and he said, I do not know why Gregory Scofield has to do anything else except read poetry. The world should just be supporting him to read. But I know he's got to write it as well, and that takes time. That was beautiful. I want to invite now everybody. It's not on the schedule, but we're going to start with our first panel, What the Land Remembers, Can It Teach Social Histories? And this is going to be moderated by Marcia Crosby. But we just want to invite people to take a very brief 5-minute leg stretch, a bathroom break, grab a cup of coffee so Marcia can meet up here with the panelists, Wes Finday, Candace Savage, Geir, Holm, and Adrian Stimson for a quick chat before the panel starts. 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay. We're going to have lunch in about an hour and, I don't know, a couple hours, I don't know what time, 1 o'clock. So you can continue your conversations then, please. Sorry to be strict, but we want to keep not too far off schedule. I just want to say three things about Marcia Crosby, who's going to moderate this panel. One is that she's one of the few people here who is willing and able to jump in at a moment's notice to moderate a panel that she was not prepared for, and we need to thank her for that. Marcia is, for those of you who don't know her, an extraordinarily influential writer and educator and researcher based in Vancouver. And it is thanks to her that everyone who was in Calgary yesterday is here today, because she is the one who got the plane down safely. And so thank you, Marcia. And with that, I'm going to let her take it away. Thank you.
Hajka, that's Koselish, I'm Haida, and Simshian, Hawa. I love this land. I don't know this land, but I love this land. I love to feel it. So I've always loved being here. I've always been taken by it ever since I first visited. So I really am grateful for this opportunity to come here and to be with so many great minds and great hearts. It's been very difficult to stay within our time. So we're going to do it a little bit different today. We're going to let each person speak for their 10 minutes, and then I'm going to ask the audience to please just respond. I'm not asking you to ask a question, because I think you're all brilliantly here for your own reasons and that you have something to add to the discourse. So if you just keep an eye on me, I'll hold up my hand when you're around close to 5 minutes, and I'd like you to wrap up your response, because we'd really like to hear from a number of you, and this is our best opportunity to do it. So before beginning, I'm going to read you some words that have been translated into English from Chinook, from two great chiefs from the Inner Plateau who came across and were traveling to Europe in 1904. We left Calgary. We were looking at the countryside, and only prairie could we see. Prairie and prairie and prairie everywhere. No tall mountains, no hills, just prairie, all flat like a giant lake. And we were really racing along, 30 miles an hour. In the morning at 5:30, we got to Regina, Saskatchewan, a real nice town, bigger than Kamloops. There are really fine houses here. It's the capital of the Northwest Territory. There's a big courthouse there. At 8 o'clock, we got to another town called Broadview. There we lost another hour. Now it was 9 o'clock in that area, but just 7 o'clock at Kamloops. We knew that all night it had been just prairie, and now more prairie, and prairie all that day until nighttime. There were plenty more towns that we saw. So, welcome all of you, and our first speaker, I'll just give you the lineup, is Geir. And I'm going to let each person introduce themselves. The next speaker will be Candace Savage. Geir, I'm sorry, I didn't want to pronounce your last name. Could you do that for me right now?
My family name is Holm, and my second name is Tore. So my name is Geir Tore Holm.
Thank you. Our third speaker is Adrian Stimson, and Wes is going to speak to us in the final moment. And if you feel like if there's time after he's finished speaking, because he's speaking from his spirit heart and from that prayer that he gave all of us when we started this morning, to have the courage to feel what you're feeling and speak from that place if you want to or you need to. And I will respect wherever time takes us, but no buts, sorry. So, Geir? could you please lead the way? And
So thanks to everybody for inviting me, and thanks for being here. And I must say I'm very happy to be here and being here at this place. I like this landscape. It made me very happy to come here from Calgary. With this landscape with low horizons, or I almost said high horizons, because I feel it's some kind of it's more space here. Oh, and I am very happy about this cleansing snow that we got here, and that makes me the snow makes me grateful. My first idea when I was invited here by Jen was to talk about my father, or tell about my father's life. Maybe to speak a monument, I thought. I wanted to tell how he grew up, how he went to school, about the war, work, struggle, joy, and sorrow. But I will not do that. I also have to tell you a little bit why I'm not into monuments, because I commented the other day that I'm not into monuments. I said it because it sounds nice to say it. I'm not into monuments. But it's also because of my artistic practice and life at all. I've been resisting doing the things expected from me, and the whole way out I've been trying to change what artistic practice can be, and therefore I am not into monuments. But since we are inland here, I try to talk about or from the oceans. Oceans are so rich, so great. Oh, she's so great. Oceans is the origin of the human beings, I heard. Even the science nowadays says that seafood makes you think well. And seafood is good for men's semen. It's about magnesium and how magnesium is working, I heard. So enjoy seafood. The oceans are feeding people all over the world. And many people live by the ocean's shores. Like where I come from, up north in Norway, we are depending on the Gulf Stream water that makes the water warm enough to live there and to fish there and have a good life. And the Gulf Stream water, it's so hot. The shores are like the interfaces we have, people living around the coasts. They interface to food, but it's also about tranquility, and it's also about fear. Today's the oceans are getting warmer. It's about the oxygen balance that is changing the acidity of the water. So big changes are taking place. And it's just 10% left of the big fishes in the oceans. And that's because of the heavy industrial fisheries in the last, let's say, 50 years. But this year was the best cod fisheries ever in northern Norway, they say. Anja, the long-tailed duck, havella. Anja, At the same time, mackerel from the south is taking over the food for the other fishes. In the Antarctic oceans, it seems to be no restrictions on the krill, small shrimp fisheries that gives you the omega-3 pills. And it's no restrictions, and it seems to be the fisheries they are so big that they damage the food for other fishes, birds, and sea mammals there. And on the top of the food chain in the Arctic oceans, the ice bear is in trouble, getting infertile because of heavy metals from industries. I myself do need seafood at least twice a week. My body is craving it. I have a hunger for fish. You see, my father was a fisherman. Johnny is the boy for me. Johnny is the boy for me. Gosse I din grå kavaj, segla inte mig förbi. He could sing. And naming his oldest son Johnny, born in 1954, after himself, Johannes, and his father, Johan. So Johnny will be Bieras Jussa Jussa Johnny. Johnny became a fisherman too. Today I think what would be monumental was that industrial fisheries were stopped and fish farming restricted, and that by international laws, like through UN. We have to stop the endless consume of products that need to be produced and transported, not to talk about the greed for oil and gas. UN must protect the local fisheries and give back to the fishing rights and to the local fishermen, and secure the future for the best livelihood and sustainable biotopes for the fishes. Thanks.
Response from the audience? I'm going to pick somebody. I think it's Peter. Or dance.
Well, thank you for your words today, and I want to honor as well the words of our elder this morning about having the courage to feel. So I'm just trying to acknowledge, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how much I'm feeling right now. There's so much fullness in the room. I also want to take a moment to reflect on the words as we're here, that there's been a lot of water in my life. I spent a lot of time traveling on from Vancouver to Victoria, doing work, traveling in that respect, trying to understand that flatness. And then as I'm here, moved to Brandon, Manitoba, traveling on the flatness of snow, wondering about the footsteps that I'm able to make on the land, wondering about the footsteps that I make on the water. From the north of BC, and we are travelers on the land, and I wonder about what that work is. Small steps which also leave a mark, leave a memory, leave a way of being. I think that also what I'm experiencing today and what I'm hearing from everyone today is that when our bodies come in contact with the land, we become collaborators in a new story for the land. Thank you.
So, are we allowed to ask questions or not allowed to ask questions?
No, you can. I'll let you.
Well, I just want to bring Geir's comments to the theme of the subtitle of this panel: "Can the Land Teach Social Histories?" And it was I want to say our, because that's how I speak often about this organizing committee, but it was actually my total ignorance to just say land. instead of water. And I think that you brought up something really important. And it was great that you started off to bring that up, to bring water into this as well, not just land. And I guess I want to suggest that that even the question that I asked with that panel is to pose a separation between social histories and natural histories, when in fact the natural histories and the natural stories create the social stories and the social histories. And the picture that you drew for us just so wonderfully captured that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen, for putting it in that way, in a good academic way and in good English. So thanks a lot.
I'd like to say something to my friend, the anti-monument man. It's very moving to hear you speak, because he posed for me last year on the Champlain Monument as a part of Sakahan, one of the first artists that posed for me on the platform. And I remember how uncomfortable you were and not sure what to do. And in the end, you had a very almost heroic pose, but a very dignified pose as well. And when you were standing on a platform, I was wondering what you were looking at.
Is that a question?
It's not a question, because I know the answer now. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Someone way in the back there? Someone way in the back there? We want you to be part of this. Hands up. Okay, hand up in the back. There's the mic.
And sorry, could you introduce yourself too, please, so we can get your name for our...
It's Priscilla Satie. Does it work?
Is it on?
Thank you for that very inspiring statement about water. Today there are 60 First Nations in British Columbia opposing the huge pipeline that Canadian government is intent on building, which will go through pristine and prime lands, homelands of many First Nations. So just as a reminder that people are now being arrested right now to save those waters. That's all I want. It inspired me to think about them.
Thank you, Hoa. I think we'll just move on. So our next speaker is Candace Savage. Do you want to use this, Candace?
We don't have to get undressed. I'll see. Okay, let's see what I can do. My name is Candace Savage, and I'm very, very honored to be here and to be part of this panel and to be the recipient of with the rest of you, of the blessing we received this morning in the presence of these mysteries. I was born in Treaty 8 territory in northern Alberta in the Peace River country in Valhalla Centre, so I can say Tusentak. I live in Saskatoon, and I'm here because of this book, A Geography of Blood, Unearthing Memory from a Prairie Landscape. This book is about what I have been required to learn by going back to the Cypress Hills time and time again over the last 10 years. For those of you who don't know, the Cypress Hills are a rise of land in extreme southeastern Alberta and southwestern Saskatchewan. The geographers tell us that they're an erosional remnant, which means that they're an archive. They remember, literally and figuratively, things that the rest of the landscape have forgotten, like dinosaurs and mammalian history. But they're also one of the richest sites for teepee rings and other stone memorials in North America. I think So what happened as a result of going back and back was that my partner and I bought a house in the little town of East End, which is in southwestern Saskatchewan, but at the east end of the Cypress Hills, on the banks of the Frenchman River. So you need to know that to understand this little bit. I'm going to read to you from the end of this book. And the other thing that you need to know is that I am the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of sodbusters, of people who came from other places as settlers on the prairie. So we'll see if I can, hold two things at once and how we do. I need the book, so. The only challenge will be turning the pages. Maybe I can do it with my nose. So we're going to go from East End across into Alberta toward the highest height of the hills at what used to be called the head of the mountain. There, on land that was once home to the Niitsitapi, then promised to the Nakota, and finally incorporated into Cypress Hills Interprovincial Park, you will find the picturesque resort town of Elkwater, Alberta, and a series of signposts that direct you to an event at the local rodeo grounds. It's June, and the place is abuzz with school kids who have been bussed in from near and far for a celebration called History in the Hills. The main attraction is an array of glowing white teepees, some painted, others plain, that are dotted across a grassy field. Off to one side, there's a portly little tent, of the kind once used by the Northwest Mounted Police, and a couple of four-walled trappers' tents. One of them has a Red River cart parked beside it. Métis fiddle tunes alternate with the throb of powwow songs, and from inside several of the teepees, a low murmur of voices is heard as the children, mostly the descendants of incomers, listen to speakers from the Cree, Nakota, Siksika, and Métis nations. Meanwhile, on the edge of the clearing, a red-coated police officer bellows cheerful commands as he puts his intake of pint-sized recruits through their paces. But we haven't come here for these festivities, as inviting as they are. Instead, our destination is a stand of aspens, a shimmer of tender spring green that is just visible on the opposite side of the field. Here, in a dazzle of sunshine, we have an unusual chance to gaze directly into the depths of the past. At our feet lies an enormous, sheer-sided pit, big enough to swallow a house. Almost 30 feet on a side and 20 feet deep, it was dug by archaeologists, trowel and dustpan in hand, over 6 summers in the early 2000s. Like the cliffs along the Frenchman Valley, in miniature, the walls of this human-made crater are striated with light and dark, reminders that the earth is constantly inconstant. Light-colored layers represent wet spells when a nearby creek flooded its banks and covered the ground with silt. Dark bands represent dry times when soil accumulated. There is even a deposit of ash from a volcano far to the south that spewed debris across the plains thousands of years ago. Yet, no matter what happened, whether floods or droughts or tectonic ruptures, bands of buffalo hunting people kept coming here to camp. They were here 8,000 years ago when someone dropped a bone needle, as white as ivory and as delicate as a stem of grass, on ground that now lies 20 feet beneath the surface. They were here 7,000 years later when someone else put down a stone awl, its surface polished, smooth as glass, and forgot to pick it up again. In all, the site has yielded nearly 1 million artifacts, going back almost 9,000 years, and documenting the repeated presence of people in this place over hundreds of generations. Each generation followed in the footsteps of those who had gone before. In fact, new arrivals sometimes situated their camps on the very same spot their ancestors had used in the past, whether 10 or 100 or 500 years before them. This stampede site has recorded this act of remembrance as a sequence of subtle basins or hearths filled with charcoal and bone, each one stacked directly on top of the one below. It appears that the Buffalo people had a relationship with this place that they maintained by visiting it, almost as if it were a person. It just so happens that on this particular June day in the 21st century, during History in the Hills, a group of thoroughly modern people has come here in the hope of renewing this ancient connection. A mixed party of students, instructors, and elders from the Nitsitapi Teacher Education Program. They cluster around one end of the excavation and listen as an archaeologist explains what this research has revealed. When the 1,000-year-old awl is passed around, the guy standing beside me murmurs that he has seen that same ultra-smooth finish before on objects in Kainai medicine bundles. Curious, I look up to see a tallish man with deep-set eyes, graying temples, and a ball cap perched on his head. He introduces himself as Narcissus. I'm not sure who had originally told me about Narcissus blood and his mission to reconnect with the sacred landscape of the Nitsitapi. But there's no doubt about it, here he is in the flesh. Later the same day, I managed to distract him from his duties as co-instructor of the teacher training class to offer him tobacco and ask for help. I run through my usual routine about tow trucks dragging us back to East End and being called to attention. I tell him about the new version of the pioneer story that I've been required to learn, one that acknowledges the violence that was done both to the Buffalo people, but to the Buffalo Prairie and to its human inhabitants, to the people who were settled here long before settlement began. But what was I still missing? What might these hills be trying to tell me that I still couldn't hear? Might he have time to clue me in? For a long moment, Narcissus doesn't answer. Then, just as I'm about to break the silence, of course there's no reason, I perfectly understand, he tips his cap to the back of his head and surprises me with a yes. How do you deal with the grief, he says, his gaze fixed on something that I cannot see. It's really a very short time since contact. 100 years is a long time, but not in Blackfoot time, not in Buffalo time. He pauses and looks at me. The knowledge that was here in this land for thousands of years has been ignored, he continues, his voice matter of fact. You can't be sustained without knowledge of the land. What we're talking about here is survival. There's just one catch to Narcissus' offer of assistance. To understand the Cypress Hills, he says, that it's not enough to know them in isolation, as an island apart. They have to be seen in relationship with other sacred places. I can feel my ears prick like a coyote's. What is he talking about? That's when you begin to understand that the renewal stopped for a reason, he goes on, weaving a web of meanings I don't immediately grasp. That's when you begin to see that a lot of knowledge can be recovered from the Blackfoot language and from the land. Even though, yes, a lot has been lost, he says, it's not too late for things to start again. We have to begin thinking about our non-human relations. So it's in a state of bewildered anticipation a few weeks later that I find myself in company with Narcissus again, making the rounds of sacred places in southern Alberta. At Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump, he tells me that the stopping of the buffalo had caused famine, not just for people, but also for the land and for all the insects, birds, and mammals that had relied on their great, snuffling, dusty, shaggy abundance. The wolves, the vultures, the grizzly bears have lost their source of food, he says. The grasslands are no longer grazed, as only the buffalo know how to do. It's a famine that the newcomers, he means people like me, are only beginning to sense, and not enough people are aware of it. Then it's on to the women's buffalo jump near Cayley, and from there to Okotoks, where we pay a visit to a monumental wing-shaped slab of quartzite that towers over bales in a hayfield. Every place we go, he tells me stories about Nappy, Old Man, and his sacred comic misadventures. Late afternoon finds us in the farthest reaches of a cow pasture, scarified by natural gas extraction. These days, we have a very violent type economy, my companion says, overlooking the dark, sinuous valley of the Bow River. Behind us, the Majorville Medicine Wheel extends its 28 spidery spokes to an enclosing circle of stones. Around us, a wide world of ochre and tan spirals out in every direction, and for a moment, I'm back home again along the Frenchman River. How we are in these places, Narcissus will tell me later. That's how we would be in the Cypress Hills if the connection hadn't been lost. Sometimes I think, like when you're on a hunger strike, there's a point of no return. But mostly, I think the knowledge is still recoverable. Whenever we're in the car traveling, Narcissus sits in the passenger seat and talks nonstop, retelling the good old stories that belong to these special places. This is a storied landscape, a ceremonial landscape, he explains, as if aware that I'm struggling to keep up, very alive with its spirits and beings. Whenever we stop to visit a place, he is quiet and relaxed. "Don't you feel welcome here?" he asks me more than once, and he always takes time to say a few words in Blackfoot. Once I hear my name, and without waiting to be asked, he explains that he has prayed for me and for this book. "We come to these sites because our ancestors have prayed for us here," he tells me, "for the people who were not yet born. They prayed for us to survive, to do the things they have always done." Did they pray for people like me? I voice this question timidly, not sure that I want to know. "Do you think they will help me now?" I'm surprised to hear these words tumble out of my mouth. For a long time, he doesn't answer. "Yes, I think so," he says at last. "You made the effort, you came here. There's a lot more to know, but this is a good start." He flashes a rueful grin. "Anyway, you newcomers are not going anywhere, and we aren't going anywhere either. I think it's a viewpoint now of we're in this together." This is a story that has to be marked, to be continued. Thanks.
Thank you. Tanya Harnett. I teach at the University of Lethbridge, and so I teach in Blackfoot land, but I'm Nakota, and my tribe comes from the Cypress Hills. I'm very pleased to hear Blackfoot people voice coming here. It would have been nice to hear that on Blackfoot land too. I have great respect for the Blackfoot people, and Narcissus Blood is an amazing man, and his understanding of the landscape is and the places in southern Alberta is fantastic. One of the things that you might not know about Narcissus Blood is he's actually a terrible tease, and he's extremely funny, and so his wisdom comes with laughter. So descending from the Cypress Hills, I'm part of the people who were, my tribe is part of the people who were in the Cypress Hills massacre. So with my father, my great-grandfather's writing, I'm lucky I have that history to talk about what was happening back then, or I guess to know it, to know that it's still part of my bloodline and it's in my memory.
Were you descended from Dan Kennedy?
Yes, yeah. Ochangaga. So that being said, I've always been kind of envious of the Blackfoot people because they have been able to keep their traditions long and alive, and the Sundance there is just amazing. And bundles and sacred bundles that have come back from a very wonderful man who started it was Jerry Conate, and he'll have his book coming out soon. We're coming home, and I'm looking forward to that because that you're talking about bringing histories back. So my envy for the Blackfoot people is that they know the Cypress Hills in a particular way. We shared the Cypress Hills for wintering. The Nakota, from Carry the Kettle, my band, we've lost that connection to that space.
An ethnic cleansing of
Yeah.
the Cypress Hills.
Yeah, and so we were actually picked up and moved to a place. Carry the Kettle is a place where Piapot wouldn't move. They called it the land of the dead. So people gathered for smallpox. So we've been moved from our place of fertile abundance to a place where we now say it's the land of the dead. And so that connection is a little bit lost. And it needs to be reclaimed. And people, hello? And people like Narcissus Blood are, we're lucky to have him. Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry, Tanya, I didn't mean to do that. I thought this was turned off when I was not on. Our next speaker, just
Ruth
remember to
Cuthan.
introduce yourself.
Ruth Cuthan from Little Pine.
Welcome, Ruth. Hi, nice to meet you in the
Yeah,
flesh,
yay.
not just Facebook.
I really have to say something because I'm Plains Cree. Our people are we're from the Cypress Hills. We went from the Cypress Hills was our northern territory all the way down to present day Great Falls in Montana. We also went west. My father said if the white people hadn't come, we would have run those Blackfoot over the mountains. And we signed treaty at Fort Walsh, but because we were people that went back and forth across this imaginary line, we were moved up to by North Battleford, north of Cutknife, Saskatchewan. And my daughter was doing video about homelands, and so we went down to Cypress Hills. We went through the Sweetgrass Hills. We went to Writing on Stone. And I got really pissed off because these Europeans make these signs that have Blackfoot territory, and they have this big black line, and it overruns our territory. So I'm here to reclaim for the Plains Cree, we were there. It wasn't the government moved us. We're actually trying to purchase land in the Cypress Hills so we can go back home. That's all I want to say.
Any response? Any more questions?
Come on, Lorna, we have to circle our own wagons. Come on.
Are you Blackfoot?
So I'm Lorna Crowshoe. I'm Begunny Blackfoot. And nice to meet you, Ruth, wherever you are. And I just want to say, if my elders were present and our historians were present, we would probably dispute that a little bit. And maybe just to sort of add to the presentation and the presentation around Cypress Hills, we call it the area, trying to think of it in our Blackfoot terms, but it's actually where our people go when they pass away. And I asked one of our historians one time, Alan Pard, who now works for the government, I asked him about this place, and he said it's our portal place to the spirit world. And so it's highly regarded by the Blackfoot people. So I know, where is Ruth? Oh, way in the back. We'll talk over lunch. But you know, I think because historically our enemies, Blackfoot territory and the Cree people, were historically enemies and were at war with each other. And so sometimes these stories are disputed, and so I just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
One more, just very brief, and then the Blackfoot himself, Adrian Stimson, is going to start. So one more back there. I can't see with these glasses on. Casey, hi.
Hi, I'm Casey Adams. I'm Cree from Winnipeg. Thanks, Ruth. Actually, I was just going to say that it really warms my heart, this passion for the land that seems to be happening back and forth today. I just wanted to make a note of a tragedy that has recently happened in Winnipeg, that the Museum of Civilization was built on treaty land and in a sacred place at the Winnipeg Forks, where there was a lot of meetings. And the people who were building this incredible building had decided to not listen to the architect and hire a certain number of archaeologists to dig up the land and learn about our histories. Instead, they chose to only hire 3, and all this information, and they only dug up, they figure, about 3% of that cultural and historical information. And so now this huge irony of a building is on this land that has now buried our histories. So I just wanted to comment about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just let me know your story.
Okay, now, are we ready here? My PowerPoint? Oh.
Talking all this. That's your time, you know.
There we go. The land remembers that we were here first, Ruth. Tansi. Okinuksukwa. Nastudi danaku apoiskamapi eksukwa skunk kisiki nuinu. In my language, of course, greeting and always saying my names. Part of that is to invite my ancestors to sit and stand beside me, and for that I'm grateful. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Wes for your teachings this morning, and everyone who's here to take part in these discussions. Also, thank you to the Stronger Than Stone organizers, Jen Budney and Wayne Bearwald, for inviting me to participate in these discussions and share what I have to share. For this session, What the Land Remembers, Can It Teach Us Social Histories? going to kind of jump all over the place. Next slide. And just sort of, you know, it's one of these things that I do to try to decolonize myself, is that I write up a bunch of notes or what I think I'm going to present, and then at the last minute throw it away, and then sort of decide to speak from my mind and my heart in regards to the land. I've been really fortunate to have lived across this land, and I was born in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So my early beginnings were in Anishinaabe territory on the shores of Gitchagumi, and so that was very formative. Immediately moved up north to James Bay, to the Northern Cree and Inuit territories, and there the land, the tundra, the winter formed a lot of my very early memories. As a child, I fell off a skidoo, and my parents kept on going for about a mile. and suddenly realized I wasn't there. And I have to say, it was one of my very first memories of the land. It was a very quiet land, except for the distant sound of the snowmobile. And I remember it very clearly because it was just this amazing silence, and also this very flat landscape with this very pink hue and white landscape. So I do remember that. So that was, I think, the very earliest teachings. And for me, when I think about that, I think about quiet, the quietness within, solitude, and how that has been a part of my life. And then we moved here to Saskatchewan, to the Gordon's First Nation. And so for me, the Touchwood Hills and the forests and the lakes and stuff were a big part of my memory. And me and my friend Gary West went and stole the Girl Guide's doll and went and hid her in the woods. So learned very early about capturing things and hiding them in the woods. And then from there to Lebret, to the Qu'Appelle Valley and the lakes in the Qu'Appelle Valley, and certainly the power that exists in those places, and walking along the shores of those lakes and picking up rocks. And I remember really clearly this one rock I picked up once. It was a fossil, and it was a perfect shell, very much like the Shell oil shell. And I remember that so clearly when I picked that up then. And I did keep that rock for a long time, but then it decided to go back to the land, and I lost it. And then we moved back home to Siksika, my homelands, my home territories, just outside of Calgary, and had the opportunity to listen to my grandma about the stories of the land, stories of our people, the Napi stories. And I think that we are the land. And if you take a look at the Blackfoot stories, the great mystery, that we come from the great mystery, that I've always loved that idea that we just really don't know. That Creator came from that, and Creator dug down into the ground and from the mud created us. Napi and Gipitaki, old man and old woman. And from there, they started to create the animals and stuff. So we are from the land, and we eventually go back to the land. So I think that that's very important, that we are not different from the land. The only thing that's different is how we have created all these different ideas about the land and the use of the land, and of course colonization. And then as an adult, moving back across the land and living all over that land, from the west coast to the east coast, and then also overseas in foreign lands. So I often think that no matter where I am, it is my land. And so I think about that, and I just want to just digress a little bit, the ideas of territory and territorialism, which is a very colonial concept of the land. And I think that one of the things that I've been certainly coming to know is this idea of shared territories, that we have all lived all over the land, and that at different times we have been stewards of the various lands. And I want to thank Lorna Crosby yesterday, and I was kind of giggling when she showed her map of original Blackfoot territories and extended way up to Prince Albert, and way down to Yellowstone, and all this sort of stuff. And I always sort of kid with my my Cree friends about I'm up here maintaining the Northern Territories. But again, that idea that these are shared territories, and just recently, having worked on a project for the Whitecap Dakota Oyete, and looking at their historical territories, and it always amazes me this idea of how the territories expand and shrink, and different tribes come in, and how we all sort of move around and have shared these territories. The bottom line is we are all responsible for the land. And I think that throughout our histories and our stories, that the monuments that are on the land, we have shared stories about them as well. So I think that that's something that I really feel wonderful about. For me, the sad reason why I had been to all these places is that I'm a product of the residential schools, conceived in a residential school, and throughout my life have lived in and around residential schools, and myself having attended residential school until grade 4. So having that intimate knowledge of the destruction and the brainwashing of our way of life is something that sticks with me very much. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about what the land can teach us in terms of stories and such. And I want to acknowledge, and as we do in the Blackfoot tradition, is all our elders who have told us these stories over the years. And for me, it's Mark Wolflade, Russell Wright, Ben Caffro, Margaret Badboy. And all these stories are told in different ways at different times, and so sometimes they're always told a little differently. And this is about, this particular image is a rock formation that was mapped that was supposed to be a representation of Napi. And as you all know, all over the land, they're all medicine wheels, but they're also effigies of people, big stone people in the land, and so this was one of them. Next one. Hokatok in the Blackfoot is rock. One hot summer day, Napi rested on the rock because the day was warm and he was tired. He spread his robe on the rock, telling the rock to keep the robe in return for letting him rest there. Suddenly the weather changed and Napi became cold as the wind whistled and the rain fell. Napi asked the rock to return his robe, but the rock refused. Napi got mad and just took the robe. As he strolled away, he heard a loud noise, and turning, he saw the rock was rolling after him. Napi ran for his life. The deer, the buffalo, and the pronghorn were Napi's friends, and they all stopped or tried to stop the rock by running in front of it. Sadly for them, the rock rolled over them. Napi's last chance was to call on the bats for help. Fortunately, they did better than their hoofed neighbors, and by diving at the rock and colliding with it, one of them finally hit the rock just right and broke it into 2 pieces. So this is why bats have squashed-in noses and squashed-in faces. And the story not only tells us how the rock was split into 2, but gives us the teachings on not to take back what you have given to someone. The one simple rock and give not cannot give only geological information, but impart morality, ethnology, and animal physiology. So when you take a look at these stories, the land is this library that we can access, and all these stories. And I'm sure that there are Cree stories that relate to that and histories. A lot of these erratics also have petroglyphs which indicate that they are sacred sites where stories were told. In particular, this rock, it's a little historical one, has a bunch of red ochre drawings that you can't see today, but through technology they've been bringing up so that we can actually see what they were. And in this case, there are a lot of circles, arrows, and people that basically tell us that the different histories that occurred in the site, and reading those, trying to understand what those stories are. So that is our legacy. This is our legacy in terms of those.
What's
that?
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. So then, you take a look at these spaces, and Ninastico Chief Mountain are one of our sacred sites for the Blackfoot people. Are prophecies where a big white god may come down at some point and the mountain may crumble, and that is the end of the world. I want to talk about quickly in the shadow of the Heart Mountain, and this is near, what is it called, outside of Calgary. I'm just losing the name of it in my mind right now. Exshaw. Throughout my life, I have watched this mountain disappear, and it is a limestone mountain. And it's interesting because it's in the shadow of Heart Mountain. And when you think of colonial monuments and such, and today this mountain is almost to the ground, I think of the mountain because it's all used for cement. And the heart of the New West, the ironies that exist between these places, and how in the shadow of Heart Mountain now sits the city of Calgary, which was made from that mountain and made from that stuff. So you get these ideas of the erasure and destruction of the land. The Glenwood Erratic. This is a story that happened 2 years ago. Petroglyphs exist there. A deliberate attempt to destroy the petroglyphs. Somebody went in at night, used acid, pressure washers, and a drill to get rid of Blackfoot history, deliberately. So there's a deliberate attempt to erase our history. This is some of the damage that was caused by that. So I think, and then even here in Saskatchewan, I pay my Cree friends, Mistassini, and how that rock was an important sacred site and dynamited to make way for the new monuments, the Gardner Dam and the Beef and Baker. And then again, going back to the writing on stone and the stories that we can learn from that. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk a lot more about a monument I created with two colleagues, Jean-Sébastien Gauthier, who's one of the technical people back there, and my partner, Ian Happy Grove. But I just want to say that part of our research were the petroglyphs at Jeffers Rock, which Lakota, Dakota, Nakota peoples. And so how to take that history and perhaps recontextualize it in a contemporary sense. So I'll tell a lot longer story about that, and the story of the medicine line itself, how we can take those stories and create new stories that speak about the past, the history, and the events that happened through time, and then into the future, where we had the grades 4, 5, and 6 of the Whitecap Dakota First Nation Imagine the Future, and their petroglyphs are now part of the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you call that when the rock gets compressed? Good work. Question? Response? Yeah. In your heart. Rock. Water. Earth. Air. Spirit. Rebecca.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody look outside. Magpie, I see you. I like this crazy image that you showed us, the dismantling of a mountain to make a human mountain, a mountain for humans. And Calgary, oh my God, what that city represents. And I was thinking about my time that I spent living in Fort McMurray in 1999 with my husband, Cuban artist Osvaldo Geir. And we went there for 6 months to live in the winter. So for him, as a new immigrant to this country, it was a very intense, immense, crazy experience. And then we went to tour the big hole, the big giant hole. And that was pretty amazing. To stand there and look at this huge space that had been created by us human beings for our oil. And so that for me was like this idea of not knowing that Calgary was built from this mountain. That's pretty amazing to me. Thank you for that.
And our final but speaker, Wes, is going to speak to us and respond to the speakers, and we're going to go with his call for us to just listen to our hearts and spirit, and thank you.
Well, one of the things that I notice one of the things that I notice is a lot of the focus is on about different experiences, different perceptions of the same environment, same reality. And we're talking from the modalities of educating each other. I come from a community and a line of knowledge keepers whose practice of teaching is done orally. So we were taught about sound as spirit, sound as power. And it's kind of interesting, you know, the other day a woman phoned me, and she's a writer. And she's really confused about, in writing, should Aboriginal or Indigenous be capitalized? And I said to her, well, actually, I come from the oral tradition, and we don't have that problem. To me, that's just a bunch of white nonsense. And as far as the land, culturally significant sites, sacred places, these things, a lot of the teachings regarding these places have to do with the spirit. When the snow falls, this is the time when we can begin to speak of the spiritual and the sacred knowledge, the spirit stories. We are not prohibited from telling stories except when the snow falls. But when the snow falls, this is the time that we can begin to delve into the knowledge of the sacred and discuss aspects of the sacred. There are other times we can talk about different kinds of stories, family histories, community histories, romantic stories for which the Cree are famous here. But in terms of the body of knowledge pertaining to the sacred, there are ways to, I guess, to understand them. And it's like, you know, when I was captured and kidnapped and taken to school, and they wanted to teach me things, rather than telling me stories that I could use to reflect and to meditate and to explore and to decipher and to filter to find the meaning for me in those stories, I had people coming up and standing in front of the room and saying, here are the facts, memorize them. Okay, they want to tell me what to think. They're not interested in helping me develop the process of learning to think for myself. So they're brainwashing me. And if I resisted, I put myself in danger. So I learned not to resist, because that was not the battleground. The battleground, I would pick up their habits, their processes, their protocols, their methodologies of teaching. But I could not resist because I was not qualified, I was powerless. I was under their control. But when I got out of there, if I survived that system of learning, you can be assured either they would kill me spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, and maybe even physically, and I would come out a broken and a dead person. Or if I was able to resist, and if I was able to access the things that I needed to stay strong and stay true to the teachings of my own people, and I had learned the self-discipline. For instance, to learn how to listen. Learn how to listen without interrupting. Learn how to listen without interfering. Develop the self-discipline physically to learn how to listen so that I could allow what the body was hearing to enter my mind and to find the pathway, the doorway to, or what my body was hearing to internalize the things that I was hearing and to find the doorway to the mind that becomes engaged through the body. And then to filter what I am hearing with my body. How does it feel? How does it feel to my heart? Does it carry the power, the purity, the integrity, and the ring of truth? And if I learned how not to react emotionally, so that I could sit and reflect, meditate, remember, dream and envision, what are these sounds saying to me? You know, as I say, teachers in the school, they say, here are the facts, memorize them. We were not given the opportunity to learn about our own processes, and our own processes were denied and denigrated to the point where we became ashamed of, you know, when we heard a story. Well, what time did this happen? What day? What year? All of these things that today scientists and educated people use to try to quantify things that they believe. They want me to remember the times according to their technology, when in their system of doing things, I did not even know I had a birthday. When I got out of school when I was 16, and I went to a farmer and I said, I am looking for a job. I can throw bales around, I can dig ditches, I can do a lot of things. Well, how old are you? I don't know. Nobody ever asked me that. Well, when's your birthday? I don't know. They never told me that in school. You don't know your birthday? No. Am I supposed to? So we approach the world in different ways, and we have to try and expand the ways that we have begun to use to try to understand and to know things. And in the system that I come from, we say knowledge, understanding is earned. It cannot be stolen. It cannot be appropriated. Although attempts can be made, but they are not valid and they are not legitimate in the dimension of the spirits. This is not only about the mind and the physical world, but truths that are spoken, that are propelled by the passion of the dimension of the emotion and guided by the spirits, can move mountains of ignorance in the minds of human beings and bring light into the darkness that we live in. It requires courage. It requires humility. I am a human, and I would like to understand who I am, where I come from, my relations in the spirit world, my relations that have gone before, and the processes of how they left, the forks in the road they came to, who guided them into that place that we call Ogisikok. So this is about not only opinions and facts, dates, times that are kept by the primitive technologies that we have developed to try to bring order into the artificial realities that we have constructed. This goes far beyond that. For someone who is a rememberer, they can remember things that happened 5,000 years ago and tell you about these things. Or they can remember things that have yet to be, because memory at the level of the spirit is fluid and it's alive, and it can move in either direction. Many of us have lost that capacity. We have been colonized. We see the world in the way that we have been told to see it, without life, without emotion, without order. And I say to you, this is a time of change. The changes cannot be superficial. The changes that we have to undergo are monumental. They affect every single one of us. If you love your children, if you love your grandchildren, if you love your ancestors, it's imperative that you begin to open up your minds, your hearts, your souls, and begin to learn to walk with humility and respect on something that is so sacred. Equity.
So I just want to respond to you. Many years ago, I moved to my, I'm speaking as if I'm in a big house, because they don't use a microphone in a very big house, and I'm going to assume that you can hear me, as we are taught to speak, yeah? So, I went to Haida Gwaii, and I went to my maternal grandfather's village in Masset, and the people there said to me, "Oh, you're a mainlander, eh? I'm Tsimshian. I come from my mother's people in Metlakatla." And I always thought I was Haida, but when I went there, they told me who I was. But they made room for me. They made a lot of room for me. And I learned songs, and I learned really old stories about my grandfather and my father's people that were from Skidegate in the lower end of the island there. But I also really learned that we have the capacity to change, and that all of these ideas about place and territory that you talked about, they move like the earth and they move like the water. And we move about in them now, and it's why we all know each other. That's how come I know Ruth Catan, because I never met her. But on Facebook we talk, and I knew I would see her again. And even though I'm seeing people here I haven't seen for many years, I've loved them for a long time. And sometimes I loved them right away when I met them. So I'm going to sing you a song that I learned when I was in Haida. And I think it really shows how people can change with you. There's a story of a very high caste chief woman, Guljat Ganga. And her boy was out on a fishing boat, and they were fishing up Masset Inlet. And while they were gone, she had heard that he had fallen off a boat and almost died, except that a man, I believe, who was a slave, had been taken as a slave, had jumped into the water and saved the boy. So when that boat came in from fishing, this big chief woman and all her family, they went down to the water and they sang him a song, the man that saved their boy. And the way you call people chief is, a chief man is Kilsly. And women, big name women, are called Guljat Ganga, which is translates sort of like boss woman. So they sang this song, and I'm only going to sing one phrase because I think my voice would give out, but response from the audience. Marjorie. That's right. We're getting to know her now, aren't they?
Hello. I understand, that we come here and there are speakers and we're supposed to be respectful of the speakers, but in a time when we're having this really large discussion about violence against women, I'm trying to figure out how we reconcile those two things in a public space. And that's, I think I just wanted people to think about that. Thank you.
Would anyone like to respond to that? That it's time, while remembering that people are the land itself, and we are a part of its breath, that women and all the missing persons who have been murdered and have gone, who are the missing, and how do we reconcile this with this talk about monuments or anti-monuments or the earth or living or being as part of who we are? Would anyone like to say some words about that right now before we close?
Hello. Hi, I'm Julianne Bowden-Herney. Kind of an emerging artist, I guess. So the work I've been working on is acknowledging the 50% of traditional matriarchal roles in Cree traditions. I myself, I'm biologically Ojibwe and Métis, and then I was adopted into Mi'kmaq and Cree family, so I have kind of connections to multiple lineages. And trying to figure all that out with the acceptance of my childhood and my traumas, and thinking about the up and coming exhibition in Regina, moving forward, never forgetting. And thinking about the sweat lodge and carrying the image of our lodges and our teepees and acknowledging that 50% belongs to us as women. And that we're in a day and age where oftentimes men are given the front line. And yet when men are at the front line, they acknowledge us as helpers to them and life givers. And my interpersonal struggles with that, and trying to make sense of trying to show my struggle through art and a language that is spirit work. And sorry, and this summer I had experiences, and I was given the right to stone carving through Lyndon Tutusis, and we had our own struggles too. But when I was working on the piece for his brother Tyrone and Winona Wheeler, they had given me through ceremony a piece of rock that ended up being a horse. And so we're talking about the memory and the birth and livelihood of how even the earth wants to look like something eventually. Just like women need to be acknowledged in ceremony as the 50%. And so here I am sitting with this rock and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And all it takes is just a moment to put my head down. And so as I'm working on this rock, I'm having dreams, and a thunder being comes to me. You're not really supposed to talk about them, but the next day when I was finishing up the piece, that bird came out in that horse, in that rock sculpture, just to remind me that even though a man or the lodge or the ceremony family I'm part of won't acknowledge that I'm still a woman growing up, and I have rights to my own gifts, and I have rights to figuring out who I am, that journey is soulfully on my own. So it was up to me to give myself permission to move forward and just, I guess, break people in and remind them how colonized our ceremonies are, to the point of deprivation. And I'm only 23, so I've learned a lot, but I really still don't know anything. And I don't even know if what I just said made sense. But connecting land with women and 50% and ceremony, I think we can all make some kind of word imagery web thing up ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you very much for your good words today about the land and the water that we live in, that we are very much a part of. Thank you so much for your beautiful imagery, and I'm looking forward to your longer story tomorrow, Adrian. Panel, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, as well, for your comments and observations and questions. Two announcements. The first one, of course, is that we're going to break for lunch now, and lunch is going to be served in the room behind this room. And I believe we're serving ourselves, so there will be a bit of a lineup. So if you're not starving, go look around the building for a while and some of the art that's here, so that you aren't just standing in line for several minutes. We will meet back here at 1:45 to begin our next panel. But also, I wanted to say that there has been all along some interest, a great deal of interest expressed with respect to Walking with Our Sisters, the commemorative art exhibit that is presently being dismantled in the Great Hall. And Wanuskewin's been kind enough to us to invite people who are interested in viewing or assisting with the deinstallation of this project are welcome to go in over the lunch hour. There are some protocols to be followed, which will be explained at the entrance. And also, we want to limit people in the room to about 20 people at a time. But I'm not going to be going in because I've seen it already. It's very powerful. I don't know what stage it's at in terms of it being dismantled, but I encourage all of you who haven't seen it yet to go in and have a look. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marcia.